Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a very wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would review this little video that I found very particularly interesting. And this is going to be a video that I'm going to review by the boxing channel known as DontesBoxingNation. And the reason why I thought that I would review this little video is because I thought that it would be particularly interesting, especially to get it from Mr. Dante's Boxing Nation's perspective. As we all know, at least when it comes to this fighter that we're going to be talking about, Mr. Teofimo Lopez, Dante is not particularly fond of Mr. Teofimo Lopez for a multitude of reasons, more than likely. But, anyways, when it comes down to it, Teofimo Lopez, of course, he's been one of the big story makers, or he's been overall one of the bigger stories in all of boxing, probably now for the past few years. First, of course, there was a lot of hype behind him as an undefeated top ranked prospect. He ended up getting the biggest win of his career before he fought Lomachenko against Richard Comey, in which many people thought that it was going to be a competitive fight. It was not. Teofimo ended up knocking him out very decently, or very impressively in that fight, I believe, in the second round. Then, of course, he had the unification fight with, in my opinion, the former number one pound for pound fighter in the world of boxing, Mr. Vasily Lomachenko, and a fighter that still is very, very decently talented. But, of course, Teofimo was able to beat him, I believe, by unanimous decision in that very, very big fight. And ever since that fight, he was one of the bigger stars in all of boxing. Well, the fight right after that, there was a certain amount of issues with Mr. Teofimo Lopez and where he was going to end up with DAZN or Top Rank or Showtime or any one of those companies or the PBC, whatever you want to call them. Well, he ended up fighting a fight on DAZN, of course, against his mandatory George Kambosos Jr. And of course, from what we all know, Teofimo Lopez ended up losing that fight against George Kambosos. In my opinion, that has been somewhat traumatic for Mr. Teofimo Lopez. Now, some people may say, well, why is it that traumatic for Teofimo? Because Teofimo didn't lose the fight necessarily in dominating fashion. It's not like it was Deontay Wilder when he lost to Tyson Fury or Canelo Alvarez when he lost to Floyd Mayweather Jr. or Dimitri Bivol. Right, but just like Deontay Wilder against Tyson Fury, Teofimo Lopez not only was very confident, he was almost getting to the point of arrogance and to the point of major delusion. And I think that he thought that maybe he could defeat anybody. And I think that that is a big part of the reason of what made him lose to Mr. George Kambosos. Because I don't think that he took George Kambosos all that seriously. I think that Teofimo Lopez thought that he was everything and that all in all that he was all that and, the best thing since sliced bread. And I think that that is hubris ended up costing him against that of a George Kambosos. And when you have someone that is that arrogant like that of a Deontay Wilder or a Teofimo Lopez, and don't get me wrong, just being confident within yourself is not all in all, being arrogant. What arrogant basically is that you believe that you're capable of things that seem either highly delusional or would not fit your skill set, or when it comes down to it, to where you don't think that you have to be your best self for any type of opponent, because that can cost you a fight, and it cost him the fight, in my opinion, against George Kambosos, because Teofimo looked absolutely horrible in that George Kambosos Jr. fight. He just did. But anyways, the next opponent that Teofimo Lopez is going to fight next, of course, is the former multiple weight division champion, I believe, Mr. Jose Pedraza, who never was an A-grade fighter in my opinion, but if you wanted to debate him as a solid B-grade fighter, someone that is going to win decent fights here and there, he was able to beat Raimundo Beltran. I believe that he was able to beat a couple of other decent fighters as well. He also was able to end up getting a draw against Richard Comey. I personally actually thought that Jose Pedraza should have won that fight. He certainly is not a bad fighter, but he's just never going to be a fighter that's on that A-grade caliber. I don't think that he has the athleticism, and I also don't think that he has the boxing IQ. But the question is about Mr. Teofimo Lopez is this next fight against Jose Pedraza, is it a good matchup for him, or is this a completely unnecessary fight? Is this a big cherry pick? I'm going to talk about that in this video, and Dante is going to give his perspective as well. Let's get into it.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So, following Teofimo's win over Campa, his last fight, during that fight, I should say, he had a couple spectators there. One was the undefeated top contender, top-ranked boxer, Arnold Barboza. For you guys that don't know, Arnold Barboza was originally supposed to be Teofimo's return bout opponent, at least if it were up to Top Rank and Arnold Barboza. But Teofimo Lopez, he wanted no parts of Arnold Barboza. And I can tell you from
Well, you know what? And Dante is going to put this in the form because, of course, as we know, yeah, he doesn't really like any other fighters besides Black American fighters. And don't get me wrong, Tio, for a time, was very arrogant when it came down to it, and it did not seem like he was going to give Devin Haney a shot and a certain amount of other fighters a shot. But at the end of the day, Teofimo Lopez still is a very decent fighter. He is a great talent, and I don't take a look at things all in all from an emotional perspective. It's no offense against Dante, but the majority of the time that he does, I don't think all in all that this fight, in my view, is a cherry pick. Dante, of course, is going to go on the narrative of he's avoiding Arnold Barboza. Once again, we must take a look at it from this perspective. Just like the same thing I said about Canelo facing Gennady Golovkin in the trilogy, and just like I said about overall Deontay Wilder facing Robert Elenius. We can say that those are cherry picks all we want to, but what we all notice about those fighters is that they're all coming off of somewhat of devastating losses. I can't really criticize a fighter that is facing someone that maybe is not quite as high tier as what they used to face if they were just coming off of a recent loss, even if it was just a couple of fights ago. That's why, I'm not going on here stating that, oh, I think Deontay Wilder versus Robert Elenius is a cherry pick, or I thought that Canelo versus Golovkin was a cherry pick, or that I think this one's a cherry pick, because I don't believe that it is. Now, if you want to state, well, is Jose Pedraza, in your opinion, as dangerous as what Arnold Barboza is? No, probably not. But, excuse me, Teofimo Lopez needs to build his career back up slowly and incrementally. That's what you have to do with a fighter that just recently lost, and especially with the type of attitude and the type of prestige that Teofimo Lopez once upon a time had. For those of you that also remember Mr. Adrian Broner, when he first ended up losing to Marcos Maidana, I don't remember a lot of big fights that he ended up taking after overall he ended up losing to Marcos Maidana. And then about a few fights later, maybe 3 or 4 fights later, he ended up facing Sean Porter and getting dominated once again. Now, the question will be about Mr. Teofimo Lopez is this, because I think that he is a caliber above someone of an Adrian Broner. Adrian Broner, in my opinion, was never an A-grade fighter. But the bigger question about Mr. Teofimo Lopez is this, because I don't really have a doubt that more than likely he'll beat Jose Pedraza. But how good is he going to be at the 140-pound division? Now, the 140-pound division, in my opinion, is not as talented necessarily as what 135 was, and it's not as talented as what 147 is, in my opinion, but it still is decently talented. And Teofimo is pretty much a natural 140-pounder, if not even a little bit heavier than that in terms of his stature. He's finally going to be facing fighters that not only may be able to handle somewhat of his skill, but also are going to be somewhat able to handle his power. Now, in my opinion, he did look pretty decently good, especially for a comeback fight in his last fight. Now, of course, Pedro Campa, I believe that is the guy's name anyway. He, of course, was not looked at as an A or B grade caliber opponent, or at least not an A grade opponent. But once again, we must understand, if you're going to throw someone that just recently lost a fight to the Lions or to the Wolves immediately, more than likely their career trajectory is not going to pan out very well. All right, you can take a look at Fernando Vargas for that, and maybe a few other fighters. You have to build them up slowly and incrementally to build their confidence back up, or their career could be very, very short-lived. So the big question is about Mr. Teofimo Lopez, in my opinion, is not really whether he can beat Jose Pedraza. Arnold Barboza would be an interesting fight. That's not me saying that Arnold Barboza would not have a chance, but I'm more than likely, if Teofimo Lopez is at his best, I probably would bet on him to beat Arnold Barboza. I just think that he's a little bit more talented than Arnold Barboza, and I think that he's the better athlete. The bigger question is about Teofimo Lopez, in my opinion, is does he have a chance against the Regis Prograis or the Jose Ramirez's or the Josh Taylors or some other guys like that? Is he really going to beat those guys? Especially a Josh Taylor, who is the best guy within that weight division. Now, in my opinion, Josh Taylor, he's not an Errol Spence Jr. or Terrence Crawford or anything, but he is a very big threat, the biggest threat at 140 pounds. It's going to be very interesting to see if Teofimo Lopez can eventually handle those type of tests. It's going to be very interesting.
what I seen in Teofimo's last fight against Campa, Barboza, he would annihilate Teofimo Lopez. And
Well, I'm not really quite sure about that, Mr. Dante, but we all know that you're very hyperbolic, and that on the know that you state a lot of shit that, in my opinion, you don't really truly believe yourself. Dante just likes to say that to trash a certain amount of fighters. Now, is it a possibility that Arnold Barboza would beat Teofimo Lopez? It's possible. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but I just never, from the couple of fights that I've seen Arnold Barboza in, I just don't know this narrative of where he destroys Teofimo Lopez. The fighters that I would be more worried about is Regis Prograis, Montana Love, if he still remains there, Josh Taylor, Jose Ramirez. Those are the main fighters that I would worry about. Specifically Josh Taylor, Montana Love, and Regis Prograis.
As feels that same way. So when Barboza was there at Teofimo's last fight, Bob Arum was still trying to make a Teofimo Lopez versus Barboza fight next.
You know what? Look, man. Like I always say, I don't knock Tio as a fighter, right? He's a good athlete, but you know what? I've seen a lot of things today that at 140, they ain't gonna happen, bro. Trust me. Not against me. If that was me in there, the fight would be way different. I guarantee you. I promise that.
All right, guys. Now listen to what Teofimo Lopez said in return about Arnold Barboza. I'm just gonna go ahead and read the text. I got it on the screen for you guys. Tio, he says to Top Rank, but please, do not set me up with that bum over there, Arnold Barboza. I need bigger fish. It's a waste of my time.
But please, do not set me up with that bum over there, Arnold Barboza. I need bigger fish. It's a waste of my time.
Why are you not investing in tax liens? No, seriously. Why are you not investing into one of the most incredible...
It's a waste of my time.
Now listen, guys, this is what makes fighters like Teofimo Lopez or Rolly Romero, fighters like that, this is what makes them look so bad. Because if you're going to decide not to fight someone who is a good fighter, the least you can do is at least give him the respect he deserves. It makes you look worse when you contradict yourself by saying, don't give me that bum over there, but then you just fought Pedro Campa, who's not even ranked. So if Arnold...
Well, listen, Dante, I agree with what you're stating there, but let's also keep the same standards, please. Because whenever it comes to trying to trash certain fighters that you don't like that of a Tyson Fury, or like that all in all of, who the hell's the other guy? Canelo Alvarez, certain fighters like that, whenever overall Demetrius Andrade or Jamal Charlo or Dillian White, someone that they can try to use the name of to try and contort or all in all try to twist the narrative and make those fighters look bad, the main fighters such as Canelo and Tyson Fury, they'll basically say, oh, well, why are you not fighting this guy? But then when those other fighters, like a Dillian White or Andrade or Charlo, when they state that they don't want to face anyone else, Dante makes the excuse of saying, oh, well, they're allegedly going after who you call the best fighter in the world. Well, couldn't that same narrative be used here with Mr. Teofimo Lopez? Now, I do understand where DontesBoxingNation is coming from. Now, in my opinion, could that be used as an excuse from Teofimo overall maybe to not face Arnold Barboza because maybe does he see someone who's a little bit too risky for too little reward? It could be that. It also maybe could be because they're trying to hype up the fight. I'm not really necessarily sure. However, what I will say about Teofimo Lopez is this. If he does eventually want to get into the ring with Josh Taylor or some of those other guys, he might be able to get into the ring with them because of his popularity still, even with that one loss, and Josh Taylor and someone else may want a name like Teo on their resume. But if they're not willing to take a fight with him because they believe that there's bigger fights elsewhere, Teofimo Lopez may have to go through someone like an Arnold Barboza if he truly wants to get a title shot. And that would be a great fight. I assume that more than likely that the Arnold Barboza versus Teofimo Lopez fight more than likely is going to happen within the next couple of fights, but you never know.
Barboza is a bum. How do you justify fighting Pedro Campa? And you can't say it's, oh, well, I was coming off of a loss. You can't say that because according to Teofimo Lopez, he didn't lose the fight. They set him up. He got robbed, etc., right? It comes off as very disingenuous.
Well, I certainly do understand Dante's point when it comes down to it. I do understand his point, but Teofimo Lopez, I think that deep down, I think right even after the fight, he tried to give this, spew of bullshit, basically saying that, he didn't lose the fight and everyone knows that he didn't lose the fight and blah, 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 all this other bullshit. But you could tell all in all, at least if you know how certain people react, when they're sore losers. You knew all in all that Teofimo Lopez, that he was very butthurt that he lost that fight. He knew that he lost that fight. He knows that he lost that fight. I don't give a shit what he says. He knows that he lost that fight. So Teofimo Lopez, I think, even knows within himself that he's going to have to get a couple of tune-up fights in if he truly is going to face within this weight division. Devin Haney, it's also going to have to be very similar. Now, of course, Devin Haney is undefeated, but the 140-pound weight division right now, I'm not going to, once again, it's not as talented as welterweight necessarily, but Devin Haney and Teofimo Lopez, even though they both are very talented fighters, they are going to overall have to sharpen up their abilities a little bit because 140 could be a very big shock for them. because some of those guys are going to be able to handle their talents, and they're also going to be able to handle their size. And Teofimo Lopez, even though he does have a great power, he does have a little bit of flaws within his style. Sometimes he can be a little bit too hittable. Sometimes, I don't know, his defense could be a little bit better, even though he's not a bad defensive fighter. And as for Devin Haney, his defense definitely needs to be better. He's very slick, and he moves around a lot, but his hands are not up a lot of the time. So Devin Haney's going to have to sharpen that up as well. But it's going to be very interesting to see where Teofimo goes from here after this Jose Pedraza fight.
You insult the fighters that are calling you out that you know deep down is a serious threat. Once again, he's calling him a bum and begging Top Rank not to put him in the ring with this guy, but he never begged Top Rank not to put him in the ring with Pedro Campa. How is Campa not a waste of your time, but Arnold Barboza is? You know, fans have been changing Teofimo's nickname almost every month. So I think this month he's earned a new nickname. Instead of the takeover, Teo should start calling himself the leftover, because he continues to take other fighters' leftovers. Now it's just...
Well, listen, Dante, I certainly understand what you're stating. But in my opinion, what Teofimo Lopez is more than likely going to try to do, he's probably going to try to get a couple of tune-up fights, and more than likely he's going to try to get a title shot at 140 pounds. Now, is it maybe going to work out like that? It could. Who knows? I think that Jamal Charlo is doing something very similar. The problem with Jamal Charlo, though, is that he alleges that everyone avoids him, but he's not willing to take on almost any A-grade fight. Teofimo Lopez, what I'll say about him is this. I'm not really going to say quite as of yet that he's avoiding Arnold Barboza, but is there a possibility to where he looks at Arnold Barboza as a little bit too risky for the reward when he says that maybe with my protege and with my prestige, you know, I can get a title shot within the next couple of fights, so why would I risk it? I think that more than likely that's probably Teofimo Lopez's mindset. Now, some may say, well, you know, that's just proof right there that he is avoiding him. You could potentially say that if you wanted to, but I'm going to give Teofimo Lopez a little bit more time because, once again, he is coming off of a loss. Now, of course, Dante did bring up the point, which is not the worst point in the world, that Teofimo says that he believes that he won that fight. Well, anyone who knows, once again, a little bit of psychology, we all know that Teofimo Lopez, that he overall did not truly believe that he won that fight. It just is what it is. I could tell that he was full of shit from the beginning. He knows that he lost that fight.
And announced that Teofimo's next opponent is going to be Jose Pedraza. And keep in mind, guys, this is after Teofimo said to Bob Arum, or to Top Rank, I should say, please don't put me in there with that Barboza guy because he's a waste of my time. He's a bum. And most important...
Well, Dante's point, I believe, is that, well, you can't really say that Barboza is a waste of your time when you're facing Pedraza and these guys. But I don't think that Teofimo Lopez, I think the only thing that he's taking a look at is that, sure, Barboza is better than these guys, but these are basically just stay busy fights. And overall, then I'm just going to get myself a title shot. So I don't think that Teofimo truly thinks that he's an actual bum. But I think that all Teofimo is saying is that with my prestige, I should be able to get a title shot, you know, all in all, without having to face him. Now, is it necessarily going to work out like that? Who knows? We'll have to see. But if it doesn't work out like that, Teofimo is more than likely going to have to eventually face him. He's probably not going to have a choice. But we'll see.
Certainly, he said, I have bigger fish to fry. So I had said in my previous video talking about this, when he had said that, I said, okay, so that means his next opponent should be a much more dangerous opponent than Barboza, right? But of course, when I said that, we all knew that wasn't going to be the case. He's taken on the weakest option he has on the table. And Jose Pedraza might actually end up beating Teofimo. This is how...
I'm not so quite sure about that. I think that Dante is underestimating Teofimo's abilities a little bit too much, but we all know how Dante gets when he does not like a fighter. Listen, what I'll state is this, once again, Jose Pedraza, in my opinion, is not Arnold Barboza. I don't really think Arnold Barboza is that special, in my opinion, but he certainly is more dangerous than a Jose Pedraza. I think what Teofimo's, once again, I think what his mindset is that he believes that he's going to get a title shot within the next couple of fights. So why even bother facing Arnold Barboza? He doesn't really bring much for me to the table. So why would I face someone like him? I think that's what Teofimo's mindset is. And I could be wrong. Maybe he overall does truly fear Arnold Barboza to a great degree. But once again, Teofimo, if you are not going to get a title shot within your next couple of fights, Arnold Barboza is a great way to go. And you may have no choice if you want to get to that higher level to face someone like an Arnold Barboza.
Bad it is for Teo at 140. Teo is in a situation really analogous to Canelo Alvarez's. Just like Canelo Alvarez, there are no more easy fights for Teofimo Lopez. I don't see Teo beating any of.
Well, the thing is with Canelo Alvarez is that Canelo's been facing very good to great competition for the past several years. Canelo hasn't fought a guy like Jose Pedraza or a Pedro Campa since he fought Avni Yildirim. Canelo is usually facing very decent competition, and I believe that Canelo is going to go after Dimitri Bivol in the rematch next. I don't know why so many people are claiming that Canelo is not going to go after the rematch. The only way that he's not going to go after that rematch is if Gilberto Soto Ramirez ends up winning that match against Dimitri Bivol, which is possible because they're both very, very decently talented and they're both around the same size. So that is a very peculiar fight. But if overall the fight does not happen at 175 next, what I will say about Canelo is this: he is going to have to face a Jamal Charlo or a David Benavidez at the least. Because if he thinks that after the Gennady Golovkin trilogy, and if he does not face the winner of the Bivol versus Ramirez fight, and if he thinks that he can just face a John Ryder or something like that, then he is sorely mistaken. He is going to get a lot of criticism for that, because that is not going to be acceptable. So we'll see what Canelo Alvarez does. But once again, I usually give Canelo a lot of the benefit of the doubt because he's shown me in the past that he's always usually willing to fight a great competition. Dante, of course, would not agree with that sentiment, but a big part of the reason why he's been trying to put that sentiment out there, why Canelo avoids a certain amount of people, is because, first of all, he doesn't have the complexion for his protection, and second of all, because Canelo Alvarez a lot of the times is usually debated as the best fighter within boxing. So those would be the multitude of reasons. But anyway.
Top guys at 140. Jose Pedraza has 4 losses on his record now. He just came off of a loss and a draw. He just lost to Jose Ramirez. And the Jose Ramirez fight, that's the fight that would have made the most sense.
That would have been a great fight, Jose Ramirez versus Teofimo Lopez. I would love to see that fight. That'd be a great fight. I would say that Teofimo all around, when he's at his best, is probably more skilled than that of a Jose Ramirez. But Jose Ramirez has a little bit of skill, and on top of that, because of what he can do pushing forward and the pressure and the power that he has, it'd be a very interesting fight. It will put Teofimo in a very interesting type of conundrum because they would be very similar in size. They both have very good power, probably A-grade power for that weight division. And it would be a real test to see if Teofimo could handle a pressure fighter the same way that Kambosos was able to mix it up with him in that fight.
And I think Jose Ramirez would have beat Teofimo.
That would have been a great fight, actually. That would have been a 50-50 fight. I think all in all that I could have maybe seen, at least at this point, Jose Ramirez beating Teo. But we'll see.
Aggression, the power. Jose Ramirez is somewhat similar to a Virgil Ortiz of the junior welterweight division.
I'm not quite so sure about that one. Jose Ramirez is talented in his own right, but he does not have the greatest of defense. And on top of that, his head can move a little bit more. Virgil Ortiz is a very, very talented fighter. Very talented, very good defense, one-shot knockout power, moves around very well. Virgil Ortiz almost reminds me of a bigger version of Mikey Garcia.
So instead of Teofimo fighting Jose Ramirez, he decides to fight the guy that just lost to Jose Ramirez. It's a tough road for Teofimo, guys. It's a tough road to the top for Teofimo from this.
It is a very tough road to the top for Mr. Teofimo Lopez. It's going to be very particularly interesting to see where he goes from here. Because if he thinks that he can talk all this shit and just continue facing Jose Pedraza and all these other guys, some of these leftovers, that's only going to last you for a couple of fights. So we'll see overall what happens.
Going on. So the fight is supposed to be scheduled December 3rd against Jose Pedraza. Now, there were rumors that his next fight was going to be on pay-per-view. They'd be fools to put this fight on pay-per-view because the numbers will be horrible. I mean, just remember, Teofimo, he only had 3,000 people show up at his last fight. And when you're supposed to be as big of a star as Teo had been promoting himself, he should have had at least 10,000 people in attendance no matter who the opponent was. Shakur Stevenson,
I would agree with that.
who put on a much better performance than Teofimo Lopez did in his last fight. Shakur, he had the second biggest attendance in the arena that he fought at against Robson. Over 10,000 fans showed up. It was the second.
Yeah, Shakur Stevenson, in my opinion, is a great fighter to watch. There's no doubt about it. Every time I watch Shakur Stevenson, I'm always amazed by his ability. He truly is a great fighter to watch.
Biggest audience in that arena for a boxing event ever. So if ESPN and Top Rank are smart, they're going to stay far, far away from pay-per-view when it comes to Teofimo Lopez's next fight. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one. All right, now check.
But anyways, that's really about it for today. Now, would I state that this next fight for Teofimo Lopez is a cherry pick? No, I wouldn't state that, just like I said with Wilder and Canelo, because they were both in very similar situations. Teofimo Lopez, once again, he can state all this bullshit about how he didn't lose that fight. He knows damn well he lost the fight against George Kambosos. You can tell in his reactions and all the things he said. It just is what it is. And he knows that he's going to have to rebuild himself at 140 pounds. At least that he's going to have to try to revive being an A-grade fighter. So we'll see what happens. But after this Jose Pedraza fight, he is going to have to step up in competition a little bit, or he is going to get a little bit of criticism, because overall he is at least going to have to fight someone on the level of at least a Arnold Barboza. And Arnold Barboza is not even the biggest test for you within that weight division. You know, so if there is a possibility of maybe getting a Josh Taylor fight, a Regis Prograis fight, or if Josh Taylor or Regis Prograis, one of these guys, especially Josh Taylor, if Josh Taylor claims that he wants Teofimo Lopez after his next fight against Jack Catterall, I believe in the rematch, Teofimo Lopez, there's a very big possibility that he might have more or one more tune-up fight, or he just may straight up go into that fight. But if Josh Taylor does not mention Teofimo Lopez, then it's very possible we might see an Arnold Barboza or maybe another opponent. Or that's at least what I would hope to see from Teofimo Lopez. Because if not, then he's going to have no more excuses. So we'll see what happens. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm going to be very interested to see where Teofimo Lopez goes from here. But that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Talk to you all later.